Let's continue taking in the sights and sounds of what you're seeing on your screen and bring in now Senior Research Fellow at the Trade Collective. That's Ms. Lebohang Pheko, who joins us via our video link for some of her reflections. And Ms. Pheko, always great having you on the SABC News Channel. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. I always find that with moments like this, we really get an opportunity to reflect on even perhaps our own mortality and what that ultimately means in a context where people have paid the ultimate price to get us here.
Yeah, that's such a profound way to open this conversation. And as you say in the introduction, that there are people who have waited literally for decades for this moment, some who perhaps may never have thought or expected that they would actually be able to repatriate their loved ones, the remains of their loved ones, and to give them the dignified and loving send-off that they deserve. And we know, and as you rightly say, we owe so much not to them as individuals, the returning heroes and sheroes, but we also owe it to ourselves for posterity to understand what our role is in building on what they did, building on their courage, building on their valor under very difficult circumstances. And as you say, under life-threatening circumstances, for everybody who was actually laid down, who was shot down or who was assassinated or who did not make it back home. There are many others who are still adrift, who are still at large, others who are as far away as Nigeria, Liberia, the United States, the United Kingdom. And I think one of the things that for many people who go away and who spend decades away, your biggest fear is, will I ever make it home? And even though they are, these loved ones, these precious heroic souls didn't live to see, but at least in their immortality, in their next life, they can at least have the peace of knowing that they rest on the soil that they so valiantly fought for.
Absolutely, and there's no overstating just how important that is for those who are still around and perhaps those who have passed on. I find that so much of contemporary politics is centered around very stark lines of demarcation, even on the continent, perhaps even in SADC. But what we're watching unfold is really the culmination of a more pan-Africanist sense of collaboration. Because let's face it, the country's strides, this hard-won democracy, many people will say wouldn't have been achieved, at least not in the way that it was, without some of these frontline states, which in many respects are at the center of what we're doing in our reflections today.
Sure. I mean, I think that whilst it's fair to say that South Africans fought valiantly and courageously for their liberation, certainly I think that many countries around, particularly Southern Africa, came alongside those struggles, came alongside that valiance, and made really huge contributions in the context of sheltering and hosting many families, hundreds and hundreds of families, or hundreds and hundreds of individuals over the years. Of course, only Zambia and Tanzania would actually allow camps. Other countries, of course, had sheltered and hosted South Africans under very strict conditions, some in encampments, some as individuals, some didn't allow liberation movements to openly organize. Only Zambia and Tanzania did so. But be that as it may, I do think it's important that as SADC and as you say, as an African continent, we realize that the liberation struggle and the liberation project, firstly, was epitomized by the huge calling card that was built around the South African liberation movement and the South African liberation struggle. The fact that countries like Zimbabwe and Mozambique wanted to delay to some extent their own liberation as long as they could. Zimbabwe and Namibia, in fact, tried to delay their own liberation and their own independence for as long as they could, and until they could see that there was some kind of a tangible way forward, light at the end of the apartheid tunnel. And I think that it is particularly important because there's a generational shift, Ayanda and the viewers. People of Kaunda's generation, people of Julius Nyerere's generation, Samora Machel's generation, all these wonderful stalwarts are gone. And the last man standing was KK a few years ago, Kenneth Kaunda. And with that goes a history, with that goes an ethic, with that goes a liberatory Pan-African solidarity framing of what it means to be an African. And unfortunately, for many of the younger generation, that history is fading away. And I think and I hope that this is the opportunity for that history to become much more preeminent, not only in South Africa, but certainly in places like Zambia and Tanzania, where there were large, hundreds of South African families. Most of us knew each other, and individuals across party lines as well, ANC, PAC, and later on the Black Consciousness Movement as well, and a few from the Unity Movement as well. And I think the other thing is, of course, Ayanda, it's an opportunity to then decentralize the idea of who is and is not a liberator, and to decenter that from a particular party, but to a cross-party, multi-liberation platform, which is only right and fair, and which is only ethical in the context of memory and ethical history telling and storytelling.